It's been another hectic week in the world and in our community, from midterm elections and ballot measures to natural disasters to climate change summits to continued war in Ukraine and so much more. The world remains both more wonderful and more terrible than most of us can possibly imagine. Amid all the headlines this week, though, I've been thinking about Benzie Poplars, a poem that is nearly 150 years old, that touches in to that wonder and terror. In 1879, Gerard Manley Hopkins celebrated a row of trees and grieved that they had been cut down. His grief expanded from those trees to the hubris of humanity, elegantly and painfully describing how quickly we alter the living world of which we are a part, often to its and our own devastation. He wrote, "My aspens dear, whose airy cages quelled or quenched in leaves the leaping sun, all felled, are all felled. Of a fresh and following folded rank not spared, not one that dandled a sandaled shadow that swam or sank on meadow and river and wind-wandering, weed-winding bank. Oh, if we but knew what we do when we delve or hew, hack and rack the growing green. Since country is so tender to touch, her being so slender that, like this sleek and seeing ball, but a prick will make no eye at all, where we, even when we mean to mend her, we end her, when we hew or delve. Aftercomers cannot guess the beauty been. 10 or 12, only 10 or 12 strokes of havoc unselve the sweet especial scene, rural scene. A rural scene, sweet, a special rural scene." Within these short verses is the haunting thought that no one could have cut down those trees if they knew and loved them like Gerard Manley Hopkins knew and loved them. Or if the trees absolutely had to be removed, no one could have done it without a great deal of care and with the sorrow of losing a friend. And you certainly couldn't fell the trees without a keen sense of humility. Their growth is counted slowly in years and decades, while their death is over in seconds and minutes, needing only 10 or 12 strokes of havoc. Once done, it is done for a long time. There is no quick remedy if you make a mistake. And once done, the beautiful chance to know and love them is gone. Aftercomers cannot guess the beauty been. So care must be taken and will be taken if you know what it is you are doing and know the love that binds all of us living things together. If you've ever watched a tree dancing in the wind, you might know the same feeling. Most haunting to me, though, was that insight that even when we mean to mend her, we end her when we hew or delve. This isn't a comment on human nature. There's nothing inherent in humanity that makes us automatically destructive to the earth at the level we've managed to destroy the earth to which we belong. But it is possible, and humans have succeeded extraordinarily in creating cultures and systems that operate with such hubris that even when we mean to mend her, we end her. And that's tragically where we find ourselves. Even as we reflect together today, global leaders are gathered for the UN Climate Change Conference, COP27, in Egypt. It's the 27th of these gatherings, which Oxfam calls crucial opportunities to show commitment and progress towards climate justice. And there is important work to be done, but there's also in these annual gatherings a bit of annual grief The reality that the dominating systems currently driven by economic considerations that value short-term profit over everything else. We cannot consume our way toward a sustainable, regenerative, equitable future. We've known that for years. As Oxfam put it last week, every year since the historic Paris Agreement, we have hoped for concrete global action on climate. And each year, while world leaders claim to be taking action, or during the Trump years, proudly reject climate action, we are forced to confront the fact that we are still far away from meeting emissions reduction and finance goals laid out in 2015, and that even the goals set out are far below what is needed to protect humanity from dangerous climate change. And they went on to say, in this sentence that has stuck in my mind ever since I read it, this year, in the face of the realization that countries' current combined climate plans will increase global emissions by over 10% by 2030, real leadership that is more than platitudes can feel far away. And Hopkins' words return to us, even where we mean to mend her, we end her. Hopkins understood this because of similar dynamics wrecking devastation in his own time. The 19th century was on fire with a relentless pursuit of capital and industry with seemingly little care for the impacts on the well-being of people or the earth. Hopkins' world and concerns were different than our concerns today, but they rhyme. In both eras, the problems threatened catastrophe with grief and helplessness in their wakes. Hopkins put this into words in another of his poems, God's Grandeur, where the earth and with it, I think, our spirits are trampled under the heavy boots of extraction and exploitation. Generations have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. It can be bewildering to look honestly at such a world and ask, how can we possibly effectively resist the exploitation of each other and the earth? What could possibly slow down this destruction, let alone heal it? What could possibly slow the exuberant embrace of violence, direct, structural, and cultural as a solution, let alone transform it? The crush of society and the crush that breaks our own hearts would easily have us coalesce into the lifeless monotony of selfishness and apathy, asking us to just look the other way, to let things be, to mind our own business on the way to an eventual and meaningless death. These questions, though, are exactly why I find voices like Hopkins to remain meaningful and empowering. I was introduced to Hopkins' poetry as a freshman in college, and they quickly found a place in my heart. I had the habit of climbing trees, especially the Osage oranges that lined our neighborhood, or the young sycamores that lined a particular creek. And sometimes I would climb the tree just to make a splash when the water was deep enough. Usually it was just to feel the gentle sway as the branches opened their long fingers to catch the wind. And when the night was friendly, just to be that much closer to the stars and moon. If I had a chance in the daylight, I'd carry a book with me up into the branches, reading while hidden away in the leaves. And most of the places where those friendly trees grew were bulldozed long ago, making room for developments abundant in concrete. Grieving for felled trees was already a familiar feeling. I say I was quickly at home with Hopkins' poetry, but there was a bit of a rough start. The first time I read his poems, I felt a little off balance. Poetry had previously been overwhelmingly presented to me in rhymed couplets and often with platitudinous meanings. So I stumbled over Hopkins' sprung rhythm and unfamiliar images, but I kept coming back until I was as familiar with the forms as I was with the meanings. Because reading one of his poems was like making a friend, the kind of friend that I could stay up with late into the night, exploring all the wonder and beauty and terror in the world. Hopkins' world and language were deeply religious, to be sure, but so was I at the time. And he gave me words and images that helped me feel hope that there might be a place for someone like me in this wild and variegated world. For example, Hopkins wrote a poem called Pied Beauty, and before you get too disappointed, pied is an adjective that means the object has two or more colors. This can apply to pies, though, so please feel at liberty to imagine the fierce purple blue of baked blueberries against a flaky golden crust. Pied Beauty is that. It's an ode to the feast of colors and designs that surround us on every side if we would just be willing to pause and notice and appreciate. Glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of couple color as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire-coal chestnut falls, finches' wings, landscape plotted and pieced, fold, fallow and plow, and all trades their gear and tackle and trim. All things counter, original, spare, strange, whatever is fickle, freckled, who knows how, with swift, slow, sweet, sour, a dazzle dim, he fathers forth whose beauty is past change. Praise him. All the things we rush by that become so commonplace that we fail to notice them become an opportunity to experience joy. The key was in my willingness to be present with them. This attention to detail, opening a door to gratitude and joy, was a theme in my young adult life, and I had a bookshelf and a backpack to prove it. Hopkins reminded me that resistance to all this exploitation and domination can be joyful instead of laborious and painful. In fact, the joy cannot be contained. The divine beauty was to be found precisely in all things counter, original, spare, strange, whatever is fickle, freckled, who knows how. Being counter in the economy of joy is not negative or hostile. It's a celebration. Counter in this case means the opposite of that mindless crush, trading death for life, apathy for courage, selfishness for mutual joy. It's a delight that reveals the staggering beauty, intricacy, and diversity of life. Nature is not mono anything. Hopkins' praise is a litany of sky and earth, cow and trout, chestnuts and birds' wings. Being counter is a reflection not of hostility, but of reconciliation, of recognizing the beauty and worth of people, animals, plants, and minerals, and of seeing in this recognition our own hope for being at peace in the midst of it. Hopkins could see both of these contrasting worlds and hold them together. If we return to God's grandeur, we find that those lines that describe the trampling of the earth are sandwiched between a celebration of the irrepressible greatness and beauty of the world on the one hand, and a divine hope that nature is never spent on the other. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers to a greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. Why do men then now not reck his rod? Generations have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. And for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness deep down things, and though the last lights off the black west went, oh, morning at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with bright wings. You don't need to be religious, let alone Christian, to feel and appreciate the shift in the language. There's a movement from wonder with grandeur flashing like shining from shook foil to loss, trodden and seared, bleared and smeared. and then to renewal, the dearest freshness, deep down things. That is a movement for us today, to be able to acknowledge honestly the seriousness of the ecological damage humans have inflicted, while learning from regenerative capacities of the earth itself to transform our cultures and support our common healing, our common life. The scarcity and alienation born of exploitation, that's not inevitable. And as the product of our own cultural assumptions and actions, its transformation is within our influence. As Wendell Berry wrote, we have lived by the assumption that what was good for us would be good for the world, and this has been based on the even flimsier assumption that we could know with any certainty what was even good for us. We have fulfilled the danger of this by making our personal pride and greed the standard of our behavior toward the world, to the incalculable disadvantage of the world and every living thing in it. And now, perhaps very close to too late, our great error has become clearer. It's not only our own creativity, our own capacity for life that is stifled by our arrogant assumption, the creation itself is stifled. He would write, "We have been wrong." We must change our lives so that it will be possible to live by the contrary assumption that what is good for this world will be good for us. And that requires that we make the effort to know the world and to learn what is good for it. We must learn to cooperate in its processes and to yield to its limits. But even more important, we must learn to acknowledge that the creation is full of mystery. We will never entirely understand it. We must abandon arrogance and stand in awe. We must recover the sense of majesty of creation and the ability to be worshipful in its presence, for I do not doubt that it is only on the condition of humility and reverence before the world that our species will be able to remain in it. Barry's choice of the word recover is very well chosen here, reminding us that other times and cultures have preserved this sense of gratitude, care, and contentment in relation to one another and the earth. More recently, Robin Wall Kimmerer wrote that the shortage is due not to how much material wealth there actually is, but to the way in which it is exchanged or circulated. The market system artificially creates society by blocking the flow between the source and the consumer. Grain may rot in the warehouse while hungry people starve because they cannot pay for it. The result is famine for some and diseases of excess for others. The very earth that sustains us is being destroyed to fuel injustice. But she didn't stop there. She said, and yet while creating an alternative to destructive economic structures is imperative, it's not enough. It's not just changes in policies we need, but also changes to the heart. Scarcity and plenty are as much qualities of the mind and spirit as they are of the economy. Gratitude plants the seeds for abundance. It celebrates cultures of regenerative reciprocity where wealth is understood to be having enough to share, and riches are counted in mutually beneficial relationships. I want to read that again. It celebrates cultures of regenerative reciprocity where wealth is understood to be having enough to share, and riches are counted in mutually beneficial relationships. Gratitude for all the earth has given us lends us courage to turn and face the Wendigo that stalks us, to refuse to participate in an economy that destroys the beloved earth, to line the pockets of the greedy, to demand an economy that is aligned with life, not stacked against it. I don't read Gerard Manley Hopkins as often as I did 20 years ago, but for lovers of trees and books, you might like to know that I still have my old paperback copy of his poems. It's a Wordsworth Poetry Library edition, and it has accompanied me on so many hikes and up so many trees. His voice remains a part of me and continues to be a reminder of the type of relationship that Roger Wall Kimmerer described, where we can and need to have with this incredible earth. Returning to those well-loved poplars that Hopkins knew, we can reflect on how different and healthy our approach to development industry, agriculture, entertainment, and our daily lives could be if we cared for the earth like Hopkins cared for those trees. We couldn't brazenly destroy the planet, willfully provoke a mass extinction event, or knowingly accelerate climate change. We couldn't do all this at the expense of the most vulnerable humans and ecosystems on Earth. We would do everything with a great deal of care, and when development did require some level of destruction, we would proceed with the sorrow of losing a friend and with a keen sense of humility. Destruction is quick work. It's life and ecological health that is counted slowly in decades and even centuries. There's little room for error for those strokes of havoc. Our scientists have been telling us this for decades, urging us to take seriously our belonging to the planet, to care for ourselves by caring for her. But there has been a gap. The dominant cultures brush all of this aside to continue to hack and rack the growing green, to accumulate wealth and power. So we must continually turn to voices and cultures that show this other way, that remind us that care must be taken, and it will be taken, if we know what it is we are doing and know the intricate web that binds all living things together. As I said before, if you've ever watched a tree dancing in the wind, you might already know that feeling. And joyful insights like these, birthed by the wisdom of our elders, the wonder of our children, the keen ears of our poets and the eyes of our painters, the songs of our singers, the hands of our gardeners, will gather to a greatness, shine out like shook foil, and make a healthier, happier planet and people possible again. Thank you.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.